Hearty welcome to the online classes of St. Thomas School, Maua. Today we are moving to the ninth chapter, and the chapter is called Auxiliary Verbs. And these auxiliary verbs also can be called as helping verbs. And we have a few examples given here. And when we see those sentences, you can understand that there is a verb combination. In the first sentence, had taken is used as to make a past perfect sentence. And in the verb combination, in the first part, it was hard, was, then must, do. All these things are called the auxiliary verbs. Auxiliary verbs, as I told you, it is the helping verbs. So what happens? These auxiliary verbs will not have any meaning in the sentence, but they are necessary in a sentence for a few situations. Those situations first we shall see, then we shall go for what I mean by primary auxiliary verbs, then what are the other types of auxiliary verbs. First, the functions. First function is to form questions we use. Auxiliary verbs change places with the subject to form questions. For example, this is taking too long. Is this taking too long? I can help you. Can I help you? Then to form the short answers, we can use the auxiliary verbs. How it is? Can you help me to clean this room? Yes, I can. Now, what is happening? There, the main verb is omitted in the response, and the meaning is implied by using this auxiliary verbs. Will you be here on time? Yes, I will. And what is all happening here is the main verb is the auxiliary verb has become the main verb. And to avoid the repetition, we use the auxiliary verbs. Bring all that you can. There, bring again it can come, but in order to avoid the repetition we have used. Now in order to form the question tags, we use the auxiliary verbs. Now what do you mean by the question tag? When do we use the question tag? We use the question tag to check or reinforce information that we may or may not be sure about. For example, this is a great book, isn't it? You can swim, can't you? They were tired, weren't they? Now, what is happening here? In the positive statement, we make the negative question tag, and in the negative statements, we make the positive question tags. I think in one of the chapters, we are going to study about these question tags. By that time, let us just forget, just to understand that in the question tag, it will be used. Now we shall see what do you mean by primary auxiliary verbs. And these auxiliary verbs can be divided into three: primary or main auxiliary verbs, then modals or modal auxiliary verbs, other auxiliary verbs with the characteristics of modals. First one is primary auxiliary verbs. Now, what do you mean by primary auxiliary verbs, or why some verbs are called primary auxiliary verbs? Now, they are called primary auxiliary verbs only because of one reason, that they are used to form the tenses or negatives or questions. And there are three forms. First one is the forms of be, then how, and do. And one more thing, last year you might have studied that these auxiliary verbs can be also used as main verbs. So now we are going to see what are the usages of these three things. First one is be. The forms of be is used with ing forms of the main verbs to form continuous tenses. She is playing basketball, or he was running. So in the present continuous tense it can be used. In the past continuous tense also it can be used, the forms of be. Is, was, were, are, all those things. Now, second one, the verb be plus past participle is used to form the passive. Now suppose if you want to make the sentences, if you want to change the sentences into passive, the form of be is important. The shop was closed. The curtains are drawn at night. So these are the two uses of the forms of be. Now how? As you know, the how is being used to form the perfect tenses, present perfect as well as past perfect. She has never worked before, or they had lived in Delhi for a long time. Now, do. The auxiliary verb do can be used to form negative of the simple present tense and past tense forms. That is the first usage. He does not dance very well. She did not obey her mother are the few examples where the forms of do has been used. Second one is to form the questions in simple present and past tense forms. For example, I want some tea. Do you want some tea? I like the party. Did you like the party? And when we use question words to form questions in the simple present tense or past, the auxiliary verb do comes after the question word. That is what you need to understand. The main verb comes after the subject and is always in its base form. For example, Karan said he was well. Then how it will be coming? The question form first, what? Then the auxiliary form, then the subject, then the main verb. That's what we have seen now. Or the another example, Nikhil keeps all his important papers in his desk. Where does Nikhil keep his important papers? So first the question word, then the auxiliary verb, then the subject, then comes the main verb followed by the other things. Now how it is being used is given in a table, and you can just read those table and see to it that you understand these things. Now we shall move to the next category, modals or modal auxiliary verbs. Modal auxiliary verbs are also called as helping verbs. They are used before main verbs to express a range of meanings such as ability, possibility, certainty, suggestion, permission, obligation, and so on. And mostly like be or how, or what we have seen in the last page, this will not be changed according to the subject of the sentence. For example, we have said he is, or they have, or they are. But this modal auxiliary verbs will not be changed according to the subjects of the sentence. And this means that the modal verb need not agree with the subject in number and person. Now we shall see the examples. Can, could, might, may, shall, should, will, would, must, all can be used as the examples. And we use can for the present ability, could for the past ability we use, then may we use for the permission, then for the suggestion or advice we use again might, then for the certainty we use must, then for the request you can use again could or can, then for the necessity or obligation you can use must. Now other auxiliary verbs with the characteristics of modals. We have a few sentences there, and those sentences there are a few words which have been given as italicized. They are modals in the meaning, but they do not behave always like modals. Such phrases are called semi-modals. Some of these are be about to, be able to, be likely to, had better, how to, ought to, used to, need to, dare, and would rather. All these things you need to understand that they are behaving in a sentence like the modal auxiliary verbs, but they are called as semi-modals. Now we shall see. We see that the semi-auxiliaries are made up of two or more separate words followed by a to infinitive or a bare infinitive. That means these semi-auxiliaries, they are called the phrases. So a phrase should have two or more words, separate words. And these semi-auxiliaries also will have two or more separate words. And sometimes to infinitive can come, or sometimes it will not be coming. For example, Sheila is likely to stay with her mother. Likely to. is being used, is likely to is being used. Unlike modals, these often change their form according to the subject and may have full range of tenses. They can also be combined with the other auxiliary verbs. We have seen that in the modal auxiliary verbs, those things will not be changed according to the subject. But here, these semi-modals can be changed according to the subject, and it will be used in it will have used in the it will have been used in almost all the tenses. For example, we were able to get in to see the film, expressing the ability but changing with the tense. He has to take responsibility for what he has done. They are expressing necessity and changing according to the subject. You need to remember one thing, only one thing. What is the difference between auxiliary verbs or the auxiliary verb and semi-auxiliary verbs, or modal auxiliary verbs and semi-auxiliary verbs? The modal auxiliary verbs will not be changed according to the subject, but the semi-auxiliary verbs will be changed according to the subject and according to the situation. And this semi-auxiliary verb will have the same function of auxiliary verbs. Now, to form the negative, note is attached to the auxiliary verb that comes after the subject and not to the semi-modal phrase. So what is here is that after the subject, whatever the verb come, the auxiliary verb comes, there it is, the note is being used in the negative sentence. For example, we were not able to get the tickets for the trip. We never say we were able not to get the tickets. We never say, but we use we weren't able to get, or you don't have to wait for me. There also, after the first auxiliary verb, it is being used. Now, from the questions, the auxiliary verb that comes just after the subject is reversed and not the semi-modal. What is happening is that when the auxiliary verb as well as the semi-auxiliary verbs have been used together, we only change the auxiliary verbs to the beginning. For example, weren't you able to get the tickets for the trip? Do you have to wait for me? So these are the things you need to understand. And since we don't have much time for the semester exams, that's why I am going a little bit faster, and we have lost many Saturdays for taking the classes. That's why I'm going a bit faster. And these things more you have already studied in the previous classes. And if you are having the 7th standard book or grammar book, then you can refer to the auxiliary verbs there. Then you will be understanding it better. And I hope you remember what we have studied last year. Now, before we wind up, I have only one thing to tell. If you cannot do great things, do small things in a great way. If you cannot do great things, do small things in a great way. Dear students, I wish you the beautiful day ahead. Enjoy with your parents. Thank you.